Hello, hello. My name is April Malone with Yes, I Work From Home, and this is the podcast. Today I have Joel Gallant from UK, near London. He's a designer and web designer, I guess. Um, Actually, I would like for you to go ahead, Joe, and introduce yourself if you're up for it.
Yeah, no worries. So, like you say, I'm Joe. I'm a designer. That can be really unhelpful because that can mean a whole lot of different things. So the main things that I create are websites and logos. And I do that for all sorts of different organizations. But a bit of a niche for me is the sort of churches and charities sector, and then small businesses and startups as well.
So, how long have you been doing web design and logos from home?
That's a really good question. From home as my full time, about 5 years. But I was doing it gradually going up to 2 days a week for several years before that. So although it was still quite a sudden shift to going full time from home, yeah, I was building up to it.
So, at this, we're in 2023 now, and it's funny because everything always feels like, pre-pandemic versus
Yeah,
post-pandemic versus during the pandemic. But it sounds like you already had established yourself there at home before everything went wild. So,
yeah.
how did that transition work out for you?
I lost my novelty. It used to be a novelty for you to say, "Oh, so you work from home," and now everyone does. But yeah, it was an interesting time, obviously, for everyone. I think that's an understatement of the century. But in a lot of senses, as much as it was difficult, my working life, my wife and our working life didn't really change that much. She works in a hospital, so she continued going in every day apart from when we were isolating. And I continued to work from home. So
Mm-hmm.
working patterns didn't change, obviously, in terms of the work that's available, in terms of, to put it bluntly, trying to persuade people to spend money on my services. That had its ups and downs through the pandemic, as everyone wasn't sure what was going on for a little while there. Um, but actually, in terms of the practical day to day, not too much changed.
Okay. Would you say that your business grew during that time, or was it hard when everyone was being pinching their pennies?
It's a good question. Um, it grew, but only if we're talking about looking over the sort of the long term. So not that we can necessarily even say now that we're out of COVID. It's one of those things, isn't it? But
Mm-hmm.
um, over that whole period, absolutely it grew, but it took time. I was very fortunate that I had just signed on two jobs to start when we went into lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that either of those would have gone ahead if we hadn't signed them before,
Mm-hmm.
because they were both for small charities who took a very big hit in their fundraising. So that got me through the initial sort of shock, the first month or two, and then after that, all of the uncertainty started to take hold, and suddenly you've got this sort of double-edged thing where everyone realizes that they need an online presence or they need to
Yeah.
improve their online presence, but no one really wants to take a risk on investing into that at a time when there's all this uncertainty. So yeah, it took a hit at that point, and sort of took a little while to grow back up. Um, but that gave opportunities for other things that maybe I didn't have time for, not quite in the whole, oh, it's lockdown, I'm going to write a book sort of way, but in terms of looking to promote myself in other ways that I hadn't done so much of before because I've been too busy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't normally like really dig that deep into how COVID affected every single person's business, but I
Mm.
figured for you, what exactly like what you said, everyone is like, "Oh my God, I need to do different kind of marketing. My online presence needs to be stronger." I was just curious how that affected you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people assume that because of the online presence thing, that basically that I had an amazing year.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
That's not me being complaining or bitter at all. It was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a learning experience, and I always try to take it as it comes anyway. I think if you're running your own business and you need to have that certainty of how much your paycheck's going to be next month, you're going to have a really stressful time.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think it was a growing experience, and eventually it came back around.
Good. I'm glad for you that you had, those couple of years ahead of time to start establishing yourself. What
Yeah.
did you come from before that? Let's go way, way back.
Okay, cool. So I was born in London. I won't get that far back. I I say so. Going back to education, I hated school, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I the one thing that sort of resonated me was when I was 15, 16, we do GCSEs over here, and it's the first time that you can choose what subjects you're going to take. And I chose media studies as one of those things. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So I can take something that I enjoy. I really enjoy watching sort of film, TV, comedy, and I can actually do something academic-y around that. Um, so I stuck with that. I went to university, and despite being a web designer now, my degree was actually in video production. Um, so did that as a degree, did some freelance work on the side of that, which was a bit of an introduction into that self-employment world. I worked on some pretty big like concerts, live events, conferences, exhibitions, that sort of thing, filming them. And then when I graduated, took the most illogical left turn that you could think of, and I went to work for a church for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, not many people see that coming, I don't think. But that was a really great time because I was able to keep doing the things which I had been doing. I made something like 40 videos over the year or two that I was in that role, like promotional videos. But I was working with students. I was doing some youth work, and then I was also brought in sort of in a creative capacity to help with the website project. Now I messed around with websites at this point, but it wasn't my area of expertise. But we were very blessed to have people in the church who it was their full-time job as developers or designers. And so I kind of ended up project managing it. I was very involved with the content and the strategy, and they were doing the actual building. So if you sort of fast forward to, I was in a marketing role after that, but I'd really enjoyed the design side of things. So as I started this marketing role, it was a job that I was offered. I wasn't looking for a job. I think in my mind I wanted to go full-time freelance, and I'm going to be a designer now. And it'd be interesting to know what had happened if I went down that route. Whether I'd have been really successful, or whether it would have crashed and burned. Who knows? But I always managed to keep a day a week and then eventually 2 days a week on the side of that marketing role to do my own stuff. So I wrote a lot of blog content over that time. And I started to build up a client base, doing mainly graphic design at that point. So posters, flyers, that sort of thing, business cards, and then branding was the part that I really enjoyed. And then as an extension of that, I got into web design because I was sensing there were frustrations. And one of the things I noticed with the church was that they were willing to pay money, but they didn't necessarily get what they paid for. So quite often you'd end up with a really nicely designed template, which they then had to just go away and fill with content themselves. And so you'd paid for all this money for that. It wasn't finished. Sometimes it never got finished. And yeah, I think when businesses waste money, that's a shame. When charities are wasting money that people have raised, that kind of irks me even more. So yeah, that's sort of where I got to the point where we were living down on the south coast of England, and my wife was finishing up her PhD, and we decided we wanted to move back closer to family. And I decided that I didn't want to be looking for a job. So I did then take the plunge at that point.
So you moved away from where you were working part-time
Yeah,
and made it full-time at that point. I can
that's right.
see some of the overlap. So I volunteered with a youth church for several years, and the guy who was in charge, the lead pastor there for the youth church, was heavily involved in all of the graphics design, the website, and the little videos that they would make. And we'd chaperone kids at camp, or I guess, do we call it chaperone? We called them, we staffed the camp.
Yeah,
And they always had to have someone in that could do really good video, because they would like video throughout the week and then make little, recap clips at the end of the day.
yeah, yeah.
And that's when I realized, how overlapping, or just how involved some of that is, especially to be relevant with kids who are pretty media savvy at this point.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
for
can
sure.
see I can see that transition happening. What about the overlap from your video years into the design? Are there some elements that work for both?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at sort of putting together a a shot on the camera, I think that there's elements of composition
Yeah.
there that there are rules that you can follow or
Hmm.
choose not to follow.
Hmm.
And I think that goes into design as well. And it's that blend between discipline and an art that as a designer, I find it hard to call myself an artist. I'm certainly a creative.
Hmm.
Um, and I aim to be as creative and artistic as possible in my work. But the end goal of that work isn't just to create art, it is to fulfill a purpose, it's to do something. And usually with a charity, that is to raise money, or with a business, that is to get people getting in touch to, inquire about your services. Um, so yeah, there's definite crossover there. I think again, with it just being that theme of something creative that you can enjoy doing, that doesn't mean that it's not without its stresses. Um, but yeah, it's a logical progression, I think.
Definitely the composition. I studied art as a minor in college.
Mm.
The whole rule of thirds, whatever
Yeah.
you're gonna do with that, choose to follow it or not. But yeah, I can see. And then probably, I don't know if you would have had to do much with fonts,
Hmm.
for overlays and things like that with video, but I can see that you had
Yeah, there's an
more.
element of sort of typography with that. And I think that even before I was doing web stuff, I was I was creating written content and putting that out there, and all of the thumbnails and graphics and everything that come with that. So I was starting to get an understanding of that. I think a lot of it is, if you're looking at technical skills, how to use Photoshop or Illustrator, you can learn that, right?
Hmm.
Someone can teach you that. You can watch tutorials. What is a little bit harder to teach is just having a visual eye for what looks good. And I think that goes with filmmaking. I think it goes with artwork, with design for sure. Um, yeah, so if you've got that, you're already quite a way along, I think.
Mm-hmm. So some people are born with that natural eye to see good design, and others have to like work really hard to learn it.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Maybe it's a nature nurture thing. Like I maybe if you compare it to like culture. So I like to think that I've got quite a good understanding of global culture, limited, but relatively good
Hmm.
because I've been abroad, because
Hmm.
I watch media from different countries. And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean I'm an expert in any one of those things, but
Hmm.
I can start to recognize what works and what doesn't. When you make a joke and it doesn't land and you go, yeah, that's because we have a completely different cultural context there.
Of course.
Um, if I hadn't grown up watching tons and tons of American sitcoms, then I wouldn't get half of the references in TV that I watch now.
Yep. Yep. Okay, I want to talk about that move that you guys made.
Mm,
So you've been working more or less 2 days a week as a freelancer in addition to your part-time church
yeah.
gig, right? Or
This
job.
wasn't at the church at this time. So,
Oh no?
as I say, when I left the church, I was I'll try and tell this story briefly. Someone from the church had been setting up a company. They'd been putting together a website for quite a while, and they gathered myself and a few other creatives together to get some feedback on the site before it launched. And so he took us through it, what it was meant to do. We went away, made some notes, and then came back in a group. And I think my honesty was probably what got me the job, even if I was slightly over honest and shared a bit too much. Because a few people shared things from the list, and then I'm going, "Is that all you got?" Because I've got loads more. So eventually, we talked about it. He offered me the job and went to work there and helped to grow his company, um, running a sort of social network for investors,
Okay.
and helping them launch that and get to 30,000 members by the time that I left. So yeah, that was what I was doing 3 days a week. And then the other days, a mix between sort of paid work and non-paid work, whether that was for the church or just for myself, creative stuff, writing stuff, that sort of thing.
Okay. So at that point, back when you lived, you said on the South Coast, did you
Yeah.
have a home office at that time?
Um, we had a spare bedroom, and I made sure that when we moved to our first flat as a married couple, that we got a desk that was big enough that we could both sit at it if we needed to.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as I say, my wife was doing her PhD, so she had a couple of days a week where she was going to be at home
Mm-hmm.
studying. As it happened, that didn't tend to cross over too much. And I think that we're both the sorts of people who find it quite hard to work with people next to us on a desk
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I had a nice desk. I've always been quite into my tech, so a couple of monitors and made it a engaging space for me to be in. Would I say it was a home office? I guess it was a bedroom that had a desk in it, you know?
It was a contained space that you could close the door when you're done
Yeah.
working. Did you end up both sharing the desk, just not at the same time? Like, did you have
Yeah.
your side and she had her side? That sounds like it would work. My husband and I are sharing his desk. He's gone now 3 days a week. And if I'm not at the kitchen table, which is not actually, for some reason, that chair is just working really well for my back. But I borrow his desk right now. He's got like a sit stand desk and a nicer chair than I have in
Yeah.
here. This is my desk that I've worked at for 13 years, but the chair is getting older and I just haven't replaced it. But I always mess like his desk up.
Yeah, I
Like
get that.
I move like things around, and I know that he likes to have everything in a place, and so I need to be more conscious, self-conscious, I guess. No, I'm
Yeah.
not saying the right word. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
respecting of his space and put everything back where I found it.
I get that. I think for me it was less that and more that if I came to work that all the stuff was just still there.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have no choice but have to disrupt her stuff to get my stuff in place.
Mm-hmm.
But all that meant was that sometimes the desk was slightly more messy because it would just have a pile on one side of it. And again, that's why I'm really glad that we got a nice wide desk that two people could fit at if they needed to.
Yeah, and I never am actually trying to purposefully mess up my husband's
No,
things.
sure.
I just have to move
Well,
his keyboard
maybe.
out of the way to make space for mine, and then I get called away. I'm a mom of 3 kids, and so I'll be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, something happened, and like then I'll just leave, and like later I'll come back and be like, sorry, honey. he thankfully he loves me.
You get away with it.
So then you had to move, and at that point you
Yeah.
decided to go all in. So when you moved, what happened?
Okay. So going just a little bit back, so we knew that we were going to be moving by like the summer, and we planned to move in the December. So in my mind, I was going to go from my 2 days a week and then build it up, gradually getting back in touch with the clients that maybe I lost touch with a little bit, or those leads for projects which we talked about but never really went anywhere.
Okay.
And so by the time January came around, I'd be in full swing. What actually happened is I went full time at my other job in order to find and sort of train up a replacement and that sort of thing. So actually, although I was still aware of it and contacting people, my freelance stuff tailed off a lot more. And so it felt a lot like starting from scratch when on, January the 1st, I basically, because we didn't want to be looking for a house remotely at the same time as, it was a week before Christmas that we moved. So doing that from a different place at the time when the PhD was coming to its climax, we didn't want to be doing that. So we moved in with my mum and dad, and I relaunched the business, as it were, from the bedroom that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
I think that living with your parents has a bad rap, but especially in today's climate, it's brilliant. It's like, if you can do it, do it. If you can.
And it took the pressure off, because the reason that we had timed it that way was because the PhD was coming to an end, and therefore my wife could start a full-time role, and that took the pressure off me a little bit, that I didn't suddenly have to find all of this income straight away.
Had she graduated in December?
She was coming to the end of her dissertation. And the new role was sort of very supportive and understanding that she took some time to do that. But she started the full-time in January, and I think officially graduated in like the April or May.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then that gave you a little wiggle room as you were establishing again. So did you, I don't want to say it in a bad way, cut ties with, that full-time job that you'd done up until Christmas?
It certainly was on friendly terms. There was talk of, if we need anything, then what's the cost going to be?
Okay.
That didn't happen very much until a year or so later, maybe a bit after that. I did a little bit more consulting,
Okay.
but more or less cut ties. It wasn't like I
Hmm.
was contracted for a day or two a week remotely there.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, it
That's
was
what I was
it was a
trying to
company
ask.
that was, yeah, no, sure. It was a company that was, as many were, not at all focused around remote working, not set up for that at all. Um, and I didn't think it ever would be. And then suddenly pandemic rolls around and more or less everyone's remote,
Yep.
But yeah.
All right. So, what did you change when okay, how long were you in your bedroom from growing up? How long were you guys there at that house?
Okay, so they agreed that we could live with them for 6 weeks, and we moved out 9 months later.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't think it was going to be realistic for us to buy a house at all. And then circumstances changed. So we were able to, but that meant taking a bit of a longer
Mhm.
process. So
Good.
yeah, I was there for a while. It was interesting. It was great in the sense of, so my sister has twin girls. They were 1 or 2 at the time, and my mum used to babysit for them quite often. So I got to see a lot more of my nieces.
Oh.
Um, it was great in terms of nice big garden. So in the summer, I could just take time and relax there. Um, I don't, I don't really think it was particularly challenging. Like, my parents are fairly chilled. So from the perspective of living there, but also the perspective of working there, I think it was pretty smooth. Maybe the one challenge with it was that, so we essentially had 2 bedrooms. We had the bedroom we slept in, and then we had the bedroom I worked in, which
Mhm.
also had a sofa and TV in it. So we had a little bit of kind of chill space. But that then was, even if I was relaxing in the evening playing the Xbox, that was my working space and it was my relaxing space, and it's that crossover, and so you don't have quite the same boundaries. Um, but yeah, we dealt with it. It was temporary.
And she was still trying to work on her dissertation as well. Did you bring your big
Yeah.
desk with you?
No, no, that went into storage, and I recently got a sit-down desk. I treated myself, so that's now in the shed. But no, thankfully, my mum had a sort of office room down at the front of the house that she could use for that as well. Um, so yeah, there were certainly times when she was coming home from a full day at work, and then we'd have dinner, and she'd go in there and continue working on that.
And then that allowed you to be able to actually chill in your workspace with the TV rather than having to tiptoe around her working on her
Yeah,
dissertation. Okay.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And then you bought a house. So,
yeah,
you moved in knowing full well that you were going to be working from home. So how did you adjust everything for that?
yeah. I mean, firstly, we chose the house having an extra room so that I could do that, which raises the future question of, if we have another child, what happens then?
Had you
Um,
had a child at that point?
no, no, not at that point. No, that's a much more recent addition. She's 1, and we've got a dog who's 2. I must say, in terms of, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but in terms of disrupting my working life and patterns, the dog was a much bigger adjustment in working from home than the baby was.
I can see that.
Yeah, he's a very needy little puppy. Um, yeah, so we chose the house. I knew it was my room. Made sure, on the boring technical side, that whilst we had the floorboards up, we put some cables in to get internet to the back of the house. And I've really enjoyed it. It's a massive blessing to be able to customize my space to make it comfortable for me. Um, yeah, not everyone has that. Like I say, when the dog came along, and because he's so needy, he couldn't be left alone, I, for a period, was working downstairs at the dining room table, and I hated it. I found
Uh-huh.
it so hard to get on with work. And I don't know if that was because I wasn't in my environment. I don't know if it was because there were distractions, or the chair was uncomfortable, or whatever. But I found that really stressful.
Let's talk about that. So,
Mm.
what was it that you could control and what couldn't you control?
Oh, that's a good question. I think distractions is one thing that I couldn't control there. Um, even when you're having to be vaguely aware of something or someone else that you're keeping an eye on, you can't focus in quite the same way. So if I was sitting down and just had to reply to a few emails, no problem. If I was trying to have like a deep focus creative session, and get some proper creative work done, that was really hard. I generally don't like working with headphones in. I used to have to in my office role because I couldn't cope with distractions in the office. And so from that point of view, I absolutely don't miss the office at all. But I think, yeah, when you've got a sleeping puppy and music through speakers that are in your office isn't really an option. And this sounds like first world problems, doesn't it?
Yep. All right.
But it does affect you, right? So it has a direct or indirect impact on your productivity, your well-being, and I hate to say it, but your income. That if you're being less productive, you're making less money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This week, someone in our Buy Nothing project, which I actually learned about through our earlier episode, Nicole Eichinger, I think. She told me about this Buy Nothing project and I learned about it. And now I'm an administrator in our group, actually. I got free an extra pair of actually what I'm using right now, just some Apple wired earbuds. But I have one that I keep up in here for my podcasting because I lost my AirPods, and another pair that I keep with my computer. For a while I was sharing. And so I have a dedicated pair for my computer that I leave downstairs. And just being able to put some white noise. I like to be at the kitchen table when my family's around, as long as they're like basically in the other room, like just doing their normal stuff. Because I like to be part of the family if I'm working on a weekend and everyone's home. But if I can hear them talking, I can't get anything done. So I put the
coffee
white noise
shop
in.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I get distracted at coffee shops. I have to put white noise in my ear. I'd like to be there, but I don't want to hear if they're. I'm too interested.
Yeah, I get that. I will, despite what I said earlier, I will work with headphones in at a coffee shop. Maybe that's because of their choice of music, but I like having the background noise. But I think you're going there, for me, with the mindset of, I know I can't control that, but that's fine. It's not my environment. I'm not trying to control it. And also knowing I'm not going there to have a deep focus session. I'm usually going there at the beginning of the week to get a bit of brain space, to organize myself for the rest of the week. And yeah, maybe to get a head start on some of the admin tasks that I don't really want to do, but doing that in a nice environment kicks me into doing it a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Certain tasks are more suitable for certain environments, right?
Yeah.
What was it? Someone came and interrupted me the other day. It was one of my kids and it was something silly. And I had just said, please don't interrupt me. And they asked me a question that they very well could have asked their father. Like, what should I eat, Mom? And I'm like, you can make that choice for yourself or go ask someone else. And about 25, 30 minutes later, I was like, wow, I haven't come back from that yet. And I mean, I could have removed myself and put myself in, up here in this closet office or my husband's desk. I could have done that, but I wanted to be with the people. I just didn't want them talking to me. And I Googled it and it was like, how long does it take to bounce back from a distraction when you're in a good focus zone? And the answer was, I think 24 to 28 minutes is like the average. And I was like, well, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, even today, I tend to work with my door closed, but that's because I'm quite often on meetings or whatever. So usually if it's open, that's a signal that it's not a bad time to interrupt. But even then, yeah, if my wife got home with our little one and I wanted to stop and say hi, but you get that sort of two-way, that guilt of, I want to do this, but I know that it's having an impact. And so I have to be aware that I'm making a choice there because it's going to take me a while to get back into this.
Do you build in breaks into your day? Because I know, you're supposed to take breaks. So can you schedule that break around when they arrive so that you are planning for it?
Yeah, I think maybe not in quite a scheduled way, but listening out and when things are going on, and just checking with myself and going, actually, now's not a bad time, and going downstairs for a bit. Yeah, for sure.
I have been advised multiple times by my eye doctor and
Mm,
ergonomic specialist to make sure that I do like look away from
yeah.
my computer, for strain reasons.
It's
And
20 or something, isn't it?
is it?
Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 meters away for 20 seconds.
Yeah,
I
there we
think.
go.
Don't quote me on that, not a scientist.
Uh-huh. In the US, we would have to do something different. It's not quite so cool, but 20 yards would probably work, right?
Yeah.
But I'm in a small office, and so I realized that, and I still haven't never done this. I don't do this. I need to, but I'm not in here as much anymore. But like I thought maybe if I put something interesting, like a clock, even like
Mm,
way out on the other side of this, wall, closer to the front of the house, that would give me a reason to look away. But I haven't done it. So that's one reason why I've heard
mm.
people say like they purposefully keep their water supply, which sounds like dehydration to me if you're focused. They specifically keep their water supply somewhere else and they don't keep
Mm,
like a pot to refill so that they are remembering to get up and like go out
yeah.
to walk
Yeah, I
around.
find a smartwatch generally quite helpful for that because it will give me that notification of you haven't stood up this hour.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I always do it. Um, but generally it's not enough of a distraction that it's going to take me 20 minutes to get back into what I'm doing. It's just maybe I'll stand up in 5 minutes and then 5 minutes goes and you don't stand up. But I do it often enough that it's still helpful.
I need to put my smartwatch back on again. I'm going through that change in life where the eyes don't work the same as they used to.
Yeah.
And my doctor prescribed me transition glasses if I want them, but I don't want them. So I'm just choosing not to turn. I need to put my smartwatch back on and turn up the size
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
little bit. All right. So you do have a kiddo at home, but she's not
Yeah.
with you when you're working.
So this is interesting. I've literally just changed my working days so that I don't work Mondays anymore because I'm
Okay.
looking after her.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my wife's just gone back to work. And then even on the days when I don't have her, that changes the schedule a little bit. So if she's with a family member on a Tuesday, then chances are I have to be there to get up and feed her and that sort of thing, and then they take care of her. Or just to be around. So on Friday is the other day that my wife works, and yeah, just to be around so that she can be dropped off from the childminder. And so that is something that's very new. I've only done the one week of that basically.
I take it
Um,
maternity leave is longer where you live than it is where we live.
yeah, it varies depending on jobs and that sort of thing. But she ended up taking around a year. Yeah,
So
yeah,
this is a new transition for your family.
very, yeah.
So are you expanding your working hours on the other 4 days of the week? Or have you just streamlined things enough that
Not
you don't need to
officially.
necessarily? Yeah, that's
Not
cool.
officially, but inevitably it happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult because there's always that flex. I don't like working evenings particularly, but a lot of the organizations I work with, charities and churches, are often mainly run by volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
and so they have day jobs. They can't generally chat in the day.
Right.
Most of the time that's okay, because if you're looking at like a 7-8 o'clock meeting anyway, then our daughter's more or less in bed by then. But like tonight, we started recording this around 7ish,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt the need to warn that it might be interrupted by a screaming baby that doesn't want to be put down to bed. And I don't know if that's happened yet because I've not heard it, and I think usually it's picked up on the microphone, so we might have got away with it. That she's tired enough to not do that tonight, or it
So they
might
don't
be
need
that
to
she's still
walk through this
downstairs. Who
room.
knows?
Yeah, who
No,
knows?
no. So
Okay.
she's only in the room next door.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with the white noise on, that's enough for her to not be too disturbed by me. And apart from when she's like really screaming the house down, it's not too disturbing for me either.
Now that my baby is 7 years old, I can assure you that that part doesn't last forever.
Yeah,
Eventually, you'll they'll outgrow that.
yeah.
Well, Joel, what do you like to talk about? What do you talk about in your podcast?
Well, that's an interesting one. So, the podcast is a fairly new thing, something that I'd been thinking about doing for a really long time, and that's a resource for churches to help them with communications and marketing. Now, I mentioned that I used to write a lot of blog content that was around that area, but for whatever reason, I think you'll know the work involved in producing a podcast. I think that was enough to put me off. But I met someone a couple of years ago at a conference that I'd been to many times in person, but it was the first time I'd been online during the pandemic. And we sort of clicked and both had the same passion. And so we started the podcast together. So it's called Gourds and Pomegranates, which is an incredibly niche reference to a Bible passage, but it's a passage in the Bible which is talking about creativity and artistry and valuing the creativity of people and the skill of craftsmen as they were building a temple. So yeah, it's niche, but there's meaning there.
Gourds and pomegranates.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And we don't, gourds isn't a very English word. I feel like that's a little bit more American. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
I know
that's
what
just
a
because
gourd
of
is.
Veggie Tales or something.
Yes, yes. Squash. I don't know. They're kind of all the
Yeah,
same family, right?
that's right. Yeah. But it's
What
not a word that comes up very much over here. Not that it, massively comes up in day-to-day life over there, I imagine.
so does this bridge into your business too, or is it pretty separate?
I mean, there's definitely a big amount of crossover. So a lot of my clients are churches. I will talk on the podcast about best practice for websites. But it's not an out and out promotional tool to get more business.
Okay.
It's there to help people, to support people. I think we probably need to be a little bit more self-promotional, if anything. So we've fallen into doing 10 episodes in a series and then just having a little break. And in the last episode of the last series, we just said, let's tell me a little bit more about what you do, and then vice versa.
Oh, cool.
So I think we probably need to do that a little bit more. Because it's not completely separate, but it's also not intentionally sort of streamlined in that way.
Like over the top.
Yeah.
Salesy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Especially since you're working with nonprofits and charities primarily.
Yeah.
What
And we're working with people who might struggle to justify £10 a month to pay for a Canva subscription. So if I come in and say, right, so my website packages start at £2,000, $2,000, they're going to go, okay, no thanks, and that's not the point. It's trying to help people where they're at.
Right. And then also just to explain the value, right, of what your service can do for them.
Yeah.
And
yeah, sure.
Let me see. Do you want to go ahead and let us know a little bit more about your website and what kinds of things who were you looking to work with?
Yeah, sure. So my website is begallant.uk. Considering that I'm someone who often spends a lot of time coming up with logos and brands and visual identity, I can't even say it took me a long time to come up with the name. I knew I wanted to have my surname in it somehow. My dad's business is called Gallant Associates, and I wanted it to be a little bit more exciting than that. But I was just stumped for ages. And then actually a friend said, oh, how about Be Gallant? It's like, yep, you've nailed it. I've been trying for weeks to get that. So that was 5 years ago now, and I still quite like the name, so must have done something right there.
It works really well.
Yeah. And trying to, reflecting on what I said about organizations paying for something and not getting the value out of it, trying to be the, antidote to that, not to sound too over dramatic. So on the website, I talk about what it means to be gallant, and it's working with integrity and honesty and trying to provide people with the best product for what they need, or the best service for what they need, as opposed to just what I want to design and being a bit of a diva with it. It's trying to provide value and care as well, I think. And love isn't a word which is talked about a lot in business, but trying to really care and support people through the project. So a lot of my sort of business clients are people who are incredibly non-tech savvy. So the idea of them being able to edit their website is a really scary thing. And it's great to be able to empower that and build that confidence. Because as most things, definitely with sort of content editing on websites, it's not rocket science. if you watch some tutorials, or as I do at the end of my projects, take them through it and how to log in, how to edit things, they can do that and build their confidence that way. The clients who are most difficult like that are the ones who think that they're really tech savvy but aren't, because they're not willing to listen. So they'll log in and go, oh, I think I've broken something, and go, yeah, you have. Because you wanted to have this amount of control and you didn't listen when I explained how to use it. So yeah, that's always an interesting balance of knowing sort of, I can have things completely unlocked so that people can edit everything, or I can lock it right down to something like they can edit just text but not images or anything, layouts, anything like that. And trying to gauge that from a client without patronizing them.
Right. Insulting them.
Yeah. But I mean, I work with all sorts of people, and that's great, because I think that's one thing that helps to keep me motivated is the variety of it as well. So I've worked with funeral directors, I've worked with comedians, and whatever you can think of. Some things really boring, and so it's a challenge to say, okay, how can we make that look interesting? And some things which are really visually appealing, and it's an easy job to do in that sense. But the variety is definitely an important thing for me.
I've been writing resumes with actually a former guest on the podcast, and I need to bring her back. We need to do a new episode now that we've been working together for a while. But that resume, we see the full gamut as well of people who are very tech savvy, and those that don't even want to do Zoom because that's overwhelming, or they don't have it. They just haven't. And so gauging people is a skill.
Yeah.
And doing it in a respectful way. But yeah, I like that. Variety, I think, is one of the things that drives me. So how long do your projects usually take? I'm assuming some of them range from days to weeks to months.
Yeah. So if it's sort of just giving some feedback on something and doing a bit of an audit, then that doesn't take too long. But I generally say between 4 and 8 weeks. It will depend if I'm doing a visual identity as well. So your logo, your typography, your colors, all of those sort of things, and that's brand design. Then that will obviously take longer. But on the whole, it's a lot more efficient to do that at the same time as a website, time-wise and cost-wise.
Okay.
If it's a website, it depends on how complex it is. But to be honest, the reason it's such a big time range that I give is less down to my work and how much I have to put into that, and more down to the responsiveness of the client. So if a client comes back to me within a couple of hours, then, to be blunt, I could probably do all of the work in like a solid week on a medium website. But that never happens.
The back and forth is
okay. It's a people thing. So yeah, the projects I tend to take 2 to 3 on at a time. Occasionally I might have 4 or 5, but only if most of them are smaller things, and then I'll have like a 1 or 2 bigger ones going throughout that. But for me, it gets too much overwhelm, and I can't give the levels of care and attention I want to the work and to the client if I take on too much. And I think, especially given that those are the reasons that I'm doing it, those are reasons I got into it, to help people, to help churches. If I'm not doing that and I'm just trying to take more and more on just for a bigger paycheck, then something's probably gone wrong somewhere.
You mentioned earlier that you are on calls a lot, communicating with your clients. What percentage would you say of your work week is communication versus just getting the work done?
I don't know in terms of putting a number on it, but I think there's communication with existing clients, and then there's promotion and trying to get new projects. And so between that, I mean, I have tried to put a boundary around those one-to-ones or those like online virtual coffee meetings when you're getting to know people a bit more. I try to book all of those in on a Thursday, and that's my main meeting day. Now it helps that I have a regular networking group that I go to every other week, and that's on a Thursday morning as well, and it can just limit it a little bit more. Obviously with some flexibility around it as well. but again, for the same reason as we said before about those focus work sessions, that
Right.
I find it really hard. I only need to have one or two meetings set at different times of the day for me to almost mentally switch off, and that the rest of that day is a write-off.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel affirmed that that's not just me.
You're not alone. Don't worry.
Yeah. So yeah, try to be disciplined with when I schedule them. Um, a lot of the client feedback is generally done over email anyway,
Hmm.
because then you've got that paper trail that you can sort of, not in terms of arguments, but in terms of going back and checking. So I've had a couple of clients who have been really into using voice notes, and so they'll send a voice note in WhatsApp, and it's that thing of, I've also had some amazing clients who say, I really like using voice notes. Is it okay if I? And that's like, I love that, because I'd
Yeah.
probably say I'd rather you didn't, but at
Right.
least they've asked.
Yeah.
When you're sending a voice note and it's a few minutes long, I have to listen to that at your pace, not at mine. So I can't quickly evaluate and skim it and go, that's not a problem, I'll deal with that later. I have to listen to the whole thing. And then the chances are, as I'm listening and making that call of, do I need to actually do something about this? Which usually I do. I then have to go, oh, I probably need to write this down so I can refer back to it.
Yeah.
So it's that thing of, it might be quicker for you, but it takes 3 or 4 times as long for me.
Hmm.
And if you're paying me by the hour, then that's your call.
Okay.
But usually it's a case of, I think it's just respect and finding what works for the other person in that working relationship.
I can see them, like, if they're trying to be hands-free while driving and just like
Yeah, for
doing a
sure.
quick something. I can see why they might want to do that to give you a response faster than, later tomorrow,
Yeah.
while they're thinking about it. But yeah, it does impact. You might have to listen to it 3 or 4 times and make
Mhm.
notes. Um, okay, so I usually like to try to start wrapping things up with a couple of questions, and I have my go-to is, I know that just about everyone has worked from home now lately, but not
Mm.
everyone has actually. They're still coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
So if someone
My
comes to
wife
you,
would be one of those people, apart from, because COVID was still a thing towards the end of the pregnancy, they made her work from home for the last month or two. And so she got to experience that as well.
oh
But at that
wow,
time,
really?
obviously our daughter's bedroom didn't have a baby in it at that
Uh-huh,
time.
uh-huh.
So we were able to get a little desk in there, and she had some space, which again is a luxury, but when she's dealing with confidentiality and patient details and that sort of thing, it made a lot of sense to have that
Hmm.
more private.
Can you remind me, is she in nursing?
Occupational therapist, which
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you guys call that the same thing over there.
Yeah, OT. Hmm.
Yeah.
So if you were to talk to someone that's working from home for the very first time,
Mm,
which, I mean, technically that might have been your wife's first time working rather than studying from home, what advice do you give to people?
good question. So I think routine is a really big thing. Um, Having a pattern that works for you, which can take a little bit of time to work out what works and what doesn't work for you. And because of that process of working it out, just, I think, relaxing with it. I think it's very easy to put so much pressure on yourself. And it doesn't matter if you're the sort of person who 9:01 a.m. you're like, right, I'm in work mode, I'm go, 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 5 o'clock finished. Or whether you're someone like myself who has a little bit more ebb and flow in the day, and I'm more focused around the tasks that I need to get done as opposed to the time that I'm working. All of that takes time. And if you put that pressure on yourself, then you're gonna probably think that you don't enjoy working from home, when actually you may well do. It's just an unnecessary extra pressure. Um, I never found the sort of get dressed, sort of formally dressed, or put your shoes on and that sort of thing. That never really did it for me. There were times when, especially like for a client meeting or something, when it's helpful to just make a little bit of an effort, not even for the client, but just to get your mindset there. but that doesn't make me more productive by itself, you know.
Mm-hmm. You have something that does help you with your productivity?
Um, it might sound like a bit of a cliche, but again, with the routine, before I start my working day, or I guess as part of the routine of starting my working day, I spend some time reading my Bible and praying. Um, and yeah, that's a big part of my routine. And I think I notice the days when I don't do that because I've just gone straight into something, which is usually because I've got an earlier meeting booked or something like that. There's always a good reason. Um, but yeah, I feel it later.
I've had a
Um,
few guests to mention, like, even if they might not necessarily be religious, that even
sure.
just like, practicing meditation
Hmm.
can have that same, or going for a walk outside in nature
Yeah.
and have a similar effect.
That's something that, I mean, with the dog, obviously I have to take him for a walk, but
Mhm.
sometimes doing that early in the day is enough of a, okay, well, by the time you've had breakfast and then, oh, I need to feed him and I need to take him out and then I should probably make myself a coffee. And like before you know it, half the day's gone. Actually being able to go through my working routine and go, I'm just going to leave that for a couple of hours, have some productive time and get things done. Because I'm not a morning person. Um, but if I delay getting started and find reasons to procrastinate and delay getting started, then it turns out that I'm not really like a late morning or an early afternoon person either if I do that. So if I can push that activity back and take him out and use that as a break, then I find that helps me. And then the other thing, I mean, we talked about variety, but I really love the phrase productive procrastination. So rather than just like twiddling your thumbs or turning on the Xbox and playing for a bit and just properly procrastinate by doing something else.
Mhm.
Like running a business has a lot of different parts to it, and if you focus too much on one of them, then it is probably going to get boring, um, especially if you're the kind of person that likes variety. So again, I try not to take on too many jobs, but having a few different jobs at the same time can mean that when I hit a bit of a mental block or I'm completely out of motivation for one of them, I just sort of shift over to working on something else for a bit.
That's probably the best piece of information I got out of this one today. And that's amazing. I like that. So you called it productive procrastination.
Yeah, I can't claim that, but I don't know who came up with it, so I guess I could claim it.
I like it. Yeah, so definitely if you're not gonna work on your work, work on
Hmm.
other work. I
Yeah,
like it. Any other tools or books or resources that have been super helpful for you in your work from home journey?
I always recommend there's three books, but by Austin Kleon. The first called Steal Like an Artist. Um, and those are generally things which quite often at the end of a project, if I want to send someone a little thank you, then it will be the first of those books. They're really short, really easy to read, quite sort of witty and motivational, but just about creativity in general. Um, and yeah, specifically, there's one of them is I think it's the third one. It's called Just Keep Going, and it's about developing those practices where you just keep plodding on, and you have those days that are slower and frustrating, and you're tired and you don't have the motivation. And actually, if you only get one or two things done off your to do list that day, then that's better than none. Give yourself permission to fail, give yourself a little bit of breathing room, take that pressure off again.
I had to
Um,
Google it to make sure I heard you correctly. Steal like an artist.
that's right. Yeah.
Nothing is completely original. All creative
Yeah.
work builds on what came before. Ah,
That's it. That's it.
and
He's a
there's
really creative
multiple.
guy. And yeah,
Okay.
there's three short little books, really, really nice to sort of reflect on. Um, yeah, I think beyond that there's no sort of one size fits all like standout resource which has said to me, this is how you work. But it's just picking and choosing little bits and again realizing that takes time and not only to find out what works for you, but what works for you at different stages.
Mhm.
That as we've talked about on this journey, um, working from home looks different for me now than it did a year ago before our daughter came along, 2 years ago before the dog came along,
Mhm.
3 or 4 years ago before we had the house. And so realizing that your situation will change and your reaction to that will change and things that worked for you before might not work anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and just not letting it get you down too much,
Mhm.
because we're really good at putting too much pressure on ourselves, I think.
I mean, that's all true for me too. 4 years ago, I was teaching full time in this space that I'm in,
Mm.
this closet office that I have.
Mm.
My husband is trying to clean back the closet. I might give him part of it. I don't know. But it was working for me then because I was on camera 40 hours a week and I
Yeah.
wasn't noticing the fact that there's no windows in here. Right now I kind of like being in the daylight because I was working nights back then too.
Mm.
And so being in the, sunshine and daylight affected my sleep pattern. And so now it's kind of nice to be in a brightly lit area because I'm on a regular person's sleep schedule.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very true for me too.
And I think the other thing is building up, if not resources, then sort of communities around you and people that can help. Because it's one thing working from home for a company where you've got a team and maybe occasionally you have sort of team social activities in person, but there's still that regular interaction. For me, as much as a lot of people really hate the word, networking has been really good because it's meant I've been meeting lots of people. Some of my work comes from there, but also it's building that community. I'm part of a few networking groups, but one that I want to give a shout out is called the Creative Collective. Um, and actually, it's been growing. We have people from all over the world, but it's just what they've really nailed is that friendly community that's supportive rather than competitive. So we'll meet every other week on Zoom. Maybe once a year have like an actual meetup,
Hmm.
but it's just for people who are in the creative sector. So that can obviously include a lot of things.
Is that your
Um,
Thursday morning group?
no, that the Thursday morning is like a local thing with just other local business owners.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I've never liked the networking groups that are too formal. There's some of them which are just very rigid and the same structure week in, week out. Usually they take place at like 6 a.m. and I'm not on board with that at all. Um, yeah, I think having something that's sort of casual and where they're people that you can do business with, it has to work from a business point of view, but people that you genuinely like. And that's something which, I know from working with churches, but lots of organizations put so much effort into building a community, and that doesn't just happen. Um, but for whatever reason, it has happened with this group. And that's really cool that something that you're doing for your business, rather than just being a drain, can actually give you energy as well.
Yeah, so it sounds as though both of the groups that you mentioned are on an
Mm.
every other week
Yeah.
schedule. So not
Yeah, that's
too
right. Yeah.
often, twice a month,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
And then are you part of others as well? Are there 3 or 4 of these or just the two?
There's other groups that I'll sort of dip into, um, uh, you know, mainly when I'm quieter with work. But I think that's okay as long as some of the relationships you've made through those that you are maintaining through LinkedIn or whatever, that you're staying in there and you're not forgetting about people, they're not forgetting about you. But through COVID, I did a lot of online networking, and I reached the point in the sort of the January following the first lockdown where I just had to dial it back. Not necessarily because I was like, I'm so busy with work that I don't have time for this, but
Hmm.
because it was sapping my energy so
Hmm.
much. Like I love talking to people, but I am by nature an introvert, and so it does take my energy.
Right.
Um, yeah, so and the other group that I am in regularly is a group that I run, very local group for Christian businesses in the area. And like I say, building that community is hard work, and we've got an event on next week, um, our first sort of proper in-person event,
Oh,
and
good.
the amount of work that, like, I'm super looking forward to it, but the amount of work that we've gone into to get 25-30 people there,
Mm.
and sell those tickets, um yeah, it's hard work, but again, it's a really good group of people. And unlike some networking which is so rigid and formal and essentially like a lot of people are just there to sell themselves and they're not interested in anything else, um this this is more than that. Like, we will we will go a little bit deeper and have deeper conversations and support each other more than just how can I help your business right now.
Are you currently taking new clients or always kind of looking for new clients? Do you want to tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, sure. I'm always looking for new projects. The difficulty I find is with sort of balancing how soon you can start them. I think sometimes charities are the worst for this, where they'll be talking about it for 2 years, and then they'll be like, right, we want to go, and you're like, okay, well, maybe if you told me, a month ago, then we could have scheduled something in. But I have other clients, it's a
Okay.
difficult thing. But
So a little lead time is good.
little lead times are always good, rather than last minute panic, because that doesn't help anyone. But yeah, no, always looking for new clients. I love helping people who are just getting started with their businesses. I tend to avoid like package pricing, because that can have bad connotations with web design of basically just shoving a logo and some of your copied and pasted content on something. But I do have a starter package for people who are getting started, which includes like a simple logo, a one-page website, and your first year's hosting, so that it can just that's something that I put together over COVID, because people were getting scared off because of the uncertainty before you even got to the point where you actually gave them a price. Like, the discussions that went into specifying and being able to quote was just too much for people. So having that as a starting point, so that's £900. I don't know what that'd be in dollars. Figure that out. But yeah, having that price as a starting point of saying, this is what you get for it. If you need other stuff, cool, let's chat. But it just helped to sort of move the conversation on. And I think especially when you're getting started and there's all the uncertainties around what your business is going to look like, that's ended up being a really helpful thing.
$1,130 US dollars.
There you go. I'll do it 1120 just for you.
Ah, okay, thank you.
No, there's always flexibility, but I think, yeah, having that set price has helped things.
Why don't you one more time tell us your website, the name of your podcast, and the best way to reach you, and then we're going to close it up.
Yeah, sure. So the website is begallant.uk, so begallant.uk. You can email me through that, or joe@gallants.uk. And yeah, the podcast is Gourds and Pomegranates. Feel free to give it a listen. If it's something that might help you, or pass it on to someone else, it might help.
And before we go, I do want to just let my listeners know, if you are interested in sharing your story, your work from home journey, anything interesting that you do or have done, or what working from home has allowed you to do that's extra, you want to tell your story, go ahead and find me at www.yesiworkfromhome.com/podcast/guest. And that will lead you directly to my podcast guest interest form. It's a good place to start. You can also email me at april@yesiworkfromhome.com. Joel, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
It's been really great. It's felt like therapy, but in a really good way.
I kind of feel that way too.
Yeah.
I feel like I learn a lot from my guests. It's almost like getting free coaching sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
Mutually beneficial, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, April.
All right. Well, this has been Joe Gallant with April Malone and Yes, I Work From Home, and we will see you next time.